I realized I wasn't alone in the building. When I started getting answers to questions I never asked. I didn't realize anything was wrong at first. That's the part that still bothers me, because if I'd noticed sooner, maybe I would have left before the building decided to notice me back. I took the job because I needed something quiet. After years of dealing with customers, managers, and constant noise, the idea of sitting alone overnight sounded almost restful. The posting said, "Overnight facilities monitor. No experience required. Mostly sitting. Mostly cameras. Mostly silence." It wasn't glamorous. It wasn't even interesting. But it was steady money, and the hours meant I wouldn't have to talk to anyone. The building was a distribution center just outside the city limits, far enough from everything that it felt like its own separate world at night. During the day it was busy, trucks backing into bays, forklifts beeping, people calling out over the sound of machinery. But when the last shift ended and the place emptied, it became something else. Not abandoned, technically. Just vacant. Like all the life drained out at once. My shift was 10 p.m. to 6 a.m. My supervisor told me I'd be the only person on site. Cameras covered the entrances. Doors locked automatically. The alarm system was already set up. If something happened, I could call dispatch or emergency services. He said it casually, like nothing ever happened there. Like he'd never had to call anyone. On my first night he walked me through everything. The office where I'd sit. The monitor wall. The hallway to the break room. The bathrooms. The emergency phone mounted on the wall with a little red label under it. "Don't touch that unless something serious happens," he said, tapping the phone lightly with his knuckle. "What counts as serious?" I asked. He hesitated longer than I expected. "You'll know," he said. Then he left. The door locked behind him with a heavy, final sound that echoed through the empty office. I remember sitting down and thinking how quickly the building changed once he was gone. The air didn't just get quiet. It got still, like the building had stopped moving. I told myself I was imagining it. First night nerves. A new place, unfamiliar sounds. I adjusted the chair, pulled the logbook closer, and looked at the monitors. 6 camera feeds, front entrance, loading docks, rear lot, 2 hallways, and a wide shot of the office itself. Everything looked normal. Empty. Boring. The first hour passed like it was supposed to. I scrolled on my phone, checked the monitors, wrote down the time every so often just to feel like I was doing something. At 11:37 p.m. One of the feeds blinked, camera 6, the storage wing hallway, just a quick flicker and then it stabilized again. I wrote it down, mostly out of habit. Right after midnight, I heard a sound that made me sit up straight. Not a bang. Not a crash. Something softer. A dull, single thud from somewhere deep inside the building, like a pallet shifting or a door settling into its frame. I froze and listened. Nothing followed. No footsteps. No voices. No second sound. Old buildings make noises. Everyone knows that. Pipes, metal, air ducts, especially at night when everything cools down. I told myself that and even believed it. Still, I checked the monitors. Nothing. A little after 1, I noticed the temperature in the office had dropped. Not enough to be dramatic, just enough that I started rubbing my hands together without thinking. I checked the thermostat. Same setting. I shrugged and went back to my phone. That's when the radio on the desk clicked on. I hadn't touched it. I hadn't even looked at it. But suddenly there was a low burst of static, like someone had bumped the volume. I stared at it for a second, annoyed, then turned it off. A few minutes later, it clicked on again. Static. I turned it off again, slower this time, like the way you close a door quietly when you don't want to make a sound. I watched it for another minute, waiting for it to come back on. It didn't. So I told myself it was nothing. A loose switch. A power surge. Then it clicked on again. Static, but louder now, like the volume had been turned up. I unplugged it. The sound stopped instantly. And I remember feeling relieved, which should have told me something, because why would I feel relieved about a radio? Around 1:30 a.m., the cameras started acting differently. Not all of them. Just one. Camera 6, the long hallway leading toward the storage wing, showed a straight corridor with fluorescent lights spaced evenly overhead. Those lights were motion activated. They were supposed to stay off unless someone walked through. That's what my supervisor told me. That's what made sense: save electricity, keep the place quiet. When I looked at the feed, the lights were on. All of them. The hallway was empty. I leaned forward, trying to see if maybe someone was just out of frame. The camera had a wide angle. If anyone was there, I should have seen at least movement, a shadow, something. There was nothing. I watched the feed for a while, waiting for the lights to time out and shut off. They didn't. Then, without warning, they started turning off one by one. Not all at once, sequentially. Like a line of lights going dark in order, as if something was walking away from the camera, moving deeper into the building. I felt a tightening in my chest that I didn't want to name. I stared hard at the screen, expecting to catch movement between the lights. Nothing. Just light, then dark, then light farther down, then dark again. I told myself the motion sensors were malfunctioning. Old wiring. Dust on the sensors. A power hiccup. That was a real explanation. A boring explanation. I wrote it down anyway. A few minutes later, the radio clicked on again. It shouldn't have. It was unplugged. I stared at it, and for a second, I thought I was hearing static. But it wasn't static. It was breathing. Slow, steady breathing right up against a microphone. I stood up so fast my chair squeaked against the floor. The breathing continued for a few seconds, then stopped as if whoever was on the other end had noticed the sound I made. A voice came through. Not distorted. Not loud. Not dramatic. Just tired. Why are you sitting there? I didn't respond at first. My throat felt tight, like it didn't want to open. I pressed the talk button with a shaking thumb. Who is this? I asked. Silence. Then a soft click. The radio went dead. I stared at it, waiting for my brain to catch up. My first thought was dispatch. Maybe they were testing the line, maybe the radio wasn't actually unplugged, maybe I'd missed something. But then I noticed my chair. I hadn't sat back down. I'd stood up so fast I practically jumped away from it. And the seat was warm. Like someone had just been sitting there. I backed away from the desk without meaning to. I looked out into the hallway through the office window. Empty. Bright fluorescent lights. Nothing moving. I forced myself to breathe slowly. In through the nose, out through the mouth. Calm down. Rational explanations. Someone messing with the radio. Faulty equipment. My imagination. That's all. But the quiet felt different now. It wasn't peaceful anymore. It was watchful. I opened the training binder on the desk, mostly to give my hands something to do. I flipped through it until I found the section on incident reporting. I didn't know why I was looking for it. I just felt like there was something I'd missed. In the back pocket of the binder, there was a copy of older log sheets. Most nights were blank. Just timestamps and all clear. But every couple of weeks, there were entries at the same time. 2:17 a.m. No details. No description. Just the time written down, and then a single word, different handwriting every time. Checked. I stared at that word for longer than I should have. It didn't read like, check the doors. It read like, something else. Like someone marking a box. Checked. I looked up at the time on the wall. 2:16 a.m. 1 minute before. I sat very still. I didn't know what I was waiting for. I just had the feeling that if I moved, I'd miss something important. 2:17 a.m. The lights above me flickered once. Then again. Then the emergency phone on the wall began to ring. I stared at it like it was an animal I didn't trust. The ring was sharp and old-fashioned, not like a modern office phone. It rang 3 times, stopped, then rang again. I picked it up. "Security," I said, and my voice sounded smaller than I wanted it to. There was a pause long enough that I almost hung up. Then someone whispered my name. Not shouted. Not spoken clearly. Just enough to recognize it. I dropped the receiver. It clattered against the wall and swung slightly on its cord. My skin felt tight all over, like the air had gotten colder again. I turned back to the monitors. Camera 1, the one pointed at the office, was live. I could see myself sitting at the desk earlier, staring toward the screens. But behind me, near the doorway, there was someone standing just out of the brightest light. A shape. A person. Still. Watching. I spun around so hard my neck hurt. The doorway was empty. I looked back at the monitor. The figure was still there on the screen, angled in a way that made it look like it was facing the camera, not me. The feed stuttered once. And the figure wasn't there anymore. I don't know how long I sat there after that. Time did something strange. It felt like the building had swallowed the sound of my thoughts and left me sitting in silence with nothing but my heartbeat. My first instinct was to tell myself it was a glitch. A delay. A looped feed. Anything that meant it wasn't real. So I did the most rational thing I could think of, I rewound the footage. The system had a basic playback function. I clicked back 30 seconds, then a minute, then 2. The office feed replayed smoothly. Me at the desk. Me leaning forward. Me turning my head as if I'd heard something. And behind me, nothing. No figure. I stared harder, rewound again, watched again. Still nothing. That should have made me feel better. It didn't. Because it meant either the camera had lied to me in real time, or it had shown me something it wasn't saving. I sat back, forcing myself to unclench my jaw. Maybe it was a buffering error. Maybe the feed briefly pulled from another timestamp. Maybe the system merged frames. Those were real things that could happen with cheap equipment. But then why had the emergency phone rung at exactly 2:17? Why had someone whispered my name? I told myself my name could have been a coincidence. Maybe I'd imagined it. Maybe I'd heard a noise and my brain filled in the rest. I wanted to believe that so badly that for a moment, I did. Then the hallway camera, camera 4, the one that covered the corridor outside the office, shifted slightly. Just a tiny wobble, like something had bumped the camera housing. I leaned in. The hallway was empty. But the camera was mounted high, near the ceiling. Nobody could bump it unless they were standing right under it. I stood up and opened the office door. The hallway was bright and quiet. The air smelled faintly like cardboard and old dust. Nothing moved. No shadows, no footprints, no signs of anyone. I walked a few steps out, looking up at the camera. It was still. Perfectly still. I went back into the office and shut the door, but I didn't lock it. I don't know why. It felt childish to lock it, like admitting I was scared. I sat down carefully, like the chair might still be warm. My phone buzzed with a notification. For half a second I expected it to be another unknown text. It wasn't. It was the weather app, Clear Skies. My hands shook anyway. I looked at the monitors again, trying to anchor myself in something predictable. The front entrance was empty. Loading docks empty. Rear lot empty. Storage hallway dark. Then the lights in the storage hallway turned on again. Not all at once. One by one. In the same pattern as before. I watched them come toward the camera this time, lighting up sequentially, as if something was walking closer. I held my breath without realizing it. The lights stopped 3/4 of the way down the hall. Then turned off, one by one, but this time not in a straight line. This time the pattern was uneven, like whatever was triggering the sensors wasn't walking normally. Like it was stopping. Turning. Standing still. I pressed the zoom button on the camera feed. The image became grainier, but clearer in the middle. I stared at the lit section of hallway. For a second, I thought I saw movement at the very edge of the frame. Not a person. Just, something darker than the dark behind the doorframe. Like someone leaning out slightly, then pulling back. I pulled the zoom out, then in again, trying to find it. Nothing. The lights shut off. And the building returned to that heavy silence that felt like pressure against my ears. The radio clicked on again. This time, there was no breathing. Just a low, soft tone, almost like feedback, and then a voice that sounded closer than it should have. Not closer on the radio, closer in the room, like the speaker was right behind me. "You keep checking the cameras," it said quietly. I didn't touch the radio. I didn't press the button. I didn't speak. I sat still because I suddenly felt that speaking would be an invitation. The voice continued. "They didn't tell you what 'checked' means." My stomach tightened so hard it felt like a cramp. I finally managed to whisper, "Who are you?" A pause. Then the voice said, very calmly, "You're sitting in my spot." I pushed my chair back and stood up. The movement felt too loud. I backed away until I was against the far wall of the office, eyes fixed on the open doorway. Nothing was there. But the air felt wrong. Thick. Like someone was in the room with me, close enough that if I reached out I'd touch them. I stared at the monitors, trying to force myself to think logically. If someone was messing with me, they had to be in the building. That meant a break-in. That meant I should call the police, call dispatch, do something. But my hand wouldn't move. Because if I called someone, I'd have to explain what was happening. And I couldn't even explain it to myself. The office camera feed, camera 1, flickered once. Then the picture stabilized. And I saw something that made my mouth go dry. The camera was showing me standing against the wall, staring toward the doorway. That part was real. But in the frame, behind the desk, in my chair, was someone sitting where I'd been sitting all night. Not looking at the camera. Looking down at the open logbook. Like they were reading. The figure's head moved slightly, slow and deliberate, as if tracking a line of text. Then the figure lifted its face toward the camera. It wasn't a blurred monster face. It wasn't anything dramatic. It was a person's face, pale in the fluorescent light, eyes open, expression neutral. Ordinary. That was the worst part. Because ordinary meant real. I couldn't move. I couldn't blink. The figure on the screen raised a hand and, very slowly, wrote something in the logbook. I could see the pen moving. I could see the page shift slightly. I couldn't see the word. Then the figure turned its head toward the doorway. Toward where I was standing in real life. Toward me. In the same moment, the office door creaked slightly, as if pressure had changed in the hallway. I didn't wait for it to open. I didn't wait for footsteps. My body moved before my mind did. I ran. Not sprinting like an action scene. Just a panicked, clumsy run down the hallway, my shoes slipping slightly on the smooth floor. The fluorescent lights overhead felt harsher now, too bright, buzzing louder than before. I reached the main corridor that led to the front entrance and slowed, because I needed to see the exit. I needed it to be there. It was there. The glass doors, the push bar, the faint reflection of my own face. I grabbed the handle and shoved. The door didn't move. I shoved again, harder. Still nothing. Panic rose hot in my chest. The doors were locked. They shouldn't have been. I had the badge. I'd used it earlier to enter. I fumbled for my ID card, pressed it to the reader. The reader light stayed red. I pressed again. Red. I pressed again, harder, as if force would make it accept. Still red. Behind me, somewhere deeper in the building, a door closed. Not slammed. Not violent. Just closed with a careful, deliberate finality. I didn't turn around. I tried the badge again, hands shaking so badly I almost dropped it. Red. The emergency phone rang again, muffled this time, as if it was ringing from far away. Then it stopped. The building went quiet. So quiet I could hear my own pulse in my ears. I backed away from the door slowly, eyes scanning the lobby area. There was a side exit nearby, an emergency exit with an alarm. In training they told me not to use it unless there was a fire, because it would trigger an alarm and dispatch would call. I didn't care. I ran to it and shoved the bar. The alarm didn't go off. The door opened like it had been unlocked the whole time. Cold night air hit my face and I stumbled outside so fast I nearly fell down the steps. I kept moving until I reached my car. My hands were trembling so violently I couldn't get the key into the ignition at first. When the engine finally turned over, I sat there breathing hard, staring at the dark outline of the building. Everything looked normal from the outside. Quiet. Empty. Like it always did. I waited for the front doors to open. For someone to step out. For any sign that I hadn't just imagined everything. Nothing happened. After a few minutes, I forced myself to drive away. I didn't go home right away. I drove aimlessly for a while, because I didn't want to sit in another quiet place. I didn't want to be alone with the memory of what I saw on that monitor. When the sun finally started to lighten the horizon, I pulled into a gas station and bought coffee just to feel normal again. Then I called my supervisor. He answered on the second ring. He sounded awake, like he'd been expecting the call. "I can't do this," I said. My voice came out steadier than I felt. "I quit." There was a pause. He didn't ask why. He didn't argue. He just exhaled slowly, like someone accepting something inevitable. "Did you write it down?" he asked. I swallowed. "Write what down?" "The time," he said. "Did you check the time?" I didn't answer fast enough. He sighed again. "Okay," he said quietly. "Listen to me. Don't go back there. Don't even go back in the parking lot. I'll handle the paperwork." "What is that place?" I asked. "What is going on in there?" Another pause. Then he said, "Some people don't leave when they're supposed to." That was all he gave me. He hung up before I could ask more. I spent the rest of the day trying to convince myself there was a simple explanation. A squatter. A prank. An employee who'd hidden inside after hours. Someone using the radio system and cameras to scare the new guy. All of that was possible. But then there was the logbook. That night, I'd left without looking at the page the figure wrote on. So, against every instinct, I went back the next afternoon, when the building was full of workers and daylight and noise, when it felt harmless. I didn't go inside. I didn't even park close. I waited outside by the front office until my supervisor came out. He looked exhausted, like he hadn't slept. "Don't," he said the second he saw me. "Just don't." "I need to know what was written," I said. In the log. His jaw tightened. He stared at me for a long moment, then reached into his folder and pulled out a copy sheet, the kind they used when they didn't want to hand over the original. He held it out without looking at it. My stomach turned as soon as I saw the page. At 2:17 a.m., someone had written. Checked. And underneath, in smaller letters, there was a second line. Not my handwriting. Not the supervisor's. Just 4 words, neat and careful. You looked. Now you're. That was it. No ending. No punctuation. Just a sentence that stopped like it had been cut off. I stared at it until the letters blurred. I looked up at my supervisor. What does that mean? He didn't answer. He just took the paper back like he regretted showing me, and said, "Go home. Lock your doors. And if your phone rings tonight, don't answer." I laughed once, but it came out wrong. This isn't funny. I'm not joking, he said, and his voice finally cracked. I've seen people come back. Not to the building. To the job. To the hours. To the feeling. I drove home with my hands tight on the wheel. That night, I didn't sleep. I sat on my couch with every light in my apartment on, trying to drown out the quiet with TV noise. Every time the screen went silent between shows, I felt my skin prickle. At 2:16 a.m., I checked the time. At 2:17 a.m., my phone lit up. No ringtone. No vibration. Just the screen turning on by itself. A missed call notification appeared. Unknown number. I stared at it, waiting for another call. For a text. For anything. Nothing happened. At 2:41 a.m., another notification appeared, this one from my Photos app. A new image. I didn't open it right away. I sat there, frozen in place, because I already knew what it would be. Eventually, I tapped it. It was a picture taken from inside my apartment. The angle was wrong for my phone sitting on the coffee table. It was higher, closer to the hallway. The photo showed my living room. It showed me on the couch, lit by the TV. And in the dark hallway behind me, just at the edge of the frame, there was a shape that looked like a person standing still. Not blurred. Not ghostly. Just present. I deleted the picture immediately, like that could undo what it meant. But even after I deleted it, I couldn't shake the feeling that the act of seeing it was the whole point. Like the building hadn't been trying to scare me. It had been trying to make sure I noticed. I quit the job. I never went back. I didn't even drive past that part of town for months. But I still wake up some nights and check the time without thinking. And sometimes, when the clock reads 2:17, my phone screen lights up in the dark. No call. No message. Just a quiet glow, like something is checking to see if I'm still here. And the worst part is that I can't tell if it's a glitch, or a reminder. Because once you notice the pattern, you start noticing everything else. The silence. The timing. The way certain places feel like they're waiting. And I can't stop thinking about that unfinished sentence in the logbook. You looked. Now you're. Like I'm the word that comes next. I don't know what the building wanted from me. I don't know who was in that chair, or how they got into the camera feed, or why the radio spoke when it was unplugged. I only know that the night I took that shift, I stopped being the person watching. And I became the thing being checked. Even now, if I hear a phone ring in the wrong kind of silence, I feel my body tense before my mind catches up. Because some nights don't end when you leave the building, they just follow you home.